Hello, this is astrologer coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon in 8 degrees of Aquarius, which will be exact on January 27th at 7:07 p.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, or 4:07 p.m. Pacific time, which is also LA time. Now, this is not only the beginning of a new moon cycle, but it's also the start of eclipse season, because we have two eclipses coming up in the next 4 weeks. And so this eclipse season will last until March 12th. And during eclipse season, it's usually a time where a lot of shifts are happening because we're shifting on a soul level. So there can be some uncertainty, and eclipses are usually Uranian in nature, so anything could happen really between now and March 12th. But we want to remember that this is happening is so that we can really move to the next level of our own evolution. Now, the placement of this new moon and the eclipses relatively to our own birth charts will also tell us which areas in our lives are most affected by this. So if you have a birth chart, feel free to take a look at that. If you don't, feel free to watch my video on how to read your birth chart. I will talk about how you can get your birth chart in that video towards the end of that video. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as well. Now, as best as you can, stay both grounded and flexible during that time. And really just don't jump the gun on anything. If you feel compelled to do something brand new, do your best to just observe that urge and to just see, where this is coming from. If it's coming from fear or if it's coming from, needing to push, then it's probably not a good idea. There's an exception for that, which is that if something happens organically and it just sort of like happens without you pushing or without you having any fearful urge, then that is perfect. But if you are ambivalent about something, especially a possible action that you want to be taking, it's best to hold off at least until eclipse season ends on March 12th. Now, eclipses usually bring major endings and beginnings, and so it is as best as you can, just trust that whatever is leaving during these next couple of weeks is making space for something better, because we're moving up, right, evolutionary speaking. And so the more willing we are to change, the easier all of this is going to be. So there's going to be less suffering if we just stay open to the process, right? Now, that said, projects and interactions that got underway before eclipse season started, so before January 27th, that's a different story, right? So you don't have to stop your life with other stuff that's already been happening beforehand just because there is eclipse season. So you can still take actions and do things. Just if it's something brand new, you want to look at the motivation or the energy that's behind that. Is it about, fearfully wanting to shift something real quickly, right? And I also will talk about the upcoming eclipses in more detail, of course, during my next forecasting forum. For those of you who don't know what that is, I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But if you want to know how the eclipses are going to impact you personally, feel free to join us. We'll be applying what's coming up to our own birth charts. And the next forum is on February 11th at 2 p.m. New York time. And for more info, also feel free to just go to my website and check out the link for the Forecasting Forum page is below the Saturn and Sagittarius video, and you can just check out what it's about, right? Now back to the new moon. The new moon, of course, is always a good time to go within and to seed anything we would like to connect with for the next 28 days that's in alignment with this new moon energy. So we're also going to be talking about the best and most potent time to set new moon intentions towards the end of the video as well. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's talk about the new moon. The new moon is in freedom-loving, forward-thinking Aquarius. And so we do have the eye on the future. We have a clear vision of our life and are ready to make some huge improvements. That's the Uranian energy and that's the Aquarian energy, right? It's about improvements and change. And Aquarius also deals with the power of ideals, technology, and invention, and also astrology, actually, as a matter of fact. And so we're really interested in the collective, and we're very much focused on changing group consciousness right now. So especially for the next 2 to 4 weeks, right? So there's really a strive for equality. There's a strive for collaboration and progress right now. And so questions you can ask yourself with this new moon energy is, where am I called to make a difference? For the next 2 to 4 weeks, where am I called to make a difference in my life, in other people's lives, in my community, in society, whatever that may look like for you. Just keep asking that question, right? And just remember with these questions too, you don't have to answer them right away. Just let the answers come to you rather than trying to answer it willfully, right? Another question you can ask yourself: what could I as an individual do for humanity, right? And how might group consciousness help humanity make progress, right? So if we can uplift group consciousness, how can that shift how we make progress as a group, as a collective, right? And of course, group consciousness gets lifted by each individual one by one, right? And it can also happen in a group setting, which can have more effect. But each one individually, if we're not willing to raise our own vibration, and if we're not willing to make a difference on ourselves, then it's going to be much more difficult to shift group consciousness. So it really comes down to the individual, especially right now with Uranus being in Aries, right? So all the questions from this video are also available on my website as always, right? So if you want to, write them down or print them out, go to astrologercoach.com and click on weekly forecasts on my website. There's a link to my weekly forecasts page. And then just look for January 22nd and look for the new moon entry, and you will find all the questions right there. You can also sign up for them to receive them via email if you prefer that. And just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecast in the subject line, and then my assistant will add you to that mailing list, and so you'll receive that. All right? Now, every single one of us has a special gift, right? And sometimes it's not so obvious to everyone what that special gift is, but there is something in us. It's like a spark, something that's unique to us, right? And if we can access that inner genius and share that with the world, we can really make quantum leaps of insight and remarkable collaborations with other people. And it's really about just understanding, what is that spark in me? What is that unique energy in me that I can share with the world, right? So just ask yourself, how does my inner genius communicate, right? And again, with these questions, meditate on them, journal on them, sit with them, marinate in them. Just allow there to be some kind of a process with it rather than needing to know the answer, right? And so how does my inner genius communicate, and where does it want to show up? Where in my life, in what area of life does it want to show up? Because, there's so many possibilities, in how we can make a difference. And so we don't want to limit ourselves. We want to really kind of explore, where does that spark feel most ignited? Where does it feel most jazzed up, right? And that's the place where we want to make the difference, where we want to kind of bring our light into the collective, right? Now, there's several aspects with this new moon. One of them is Venus in Pisces is squaring Saturn in Sagittarius, same day as the new moon becomes exact, and also makes a conjunction with Chiron and Mars in Pisces. So what does all that mean? This really invites us to just stretch a little bit for the duration of this lunar cycle and really grow beyond what we currently know ourselves to be, especially when it comes to what we value and our relationships with other people. And we're also called to heal wounds from the past, right? Because it's connected to Chiron. So the key here really is to approach things with intuition and with maturity, right? Intuition is that Pisces energy. Maturity is Saturn energy, right? So as best as you can, work on self-acceptance and self-compassion. Be honest with yourself about where your limitations and expectations towards others are. And also aim for wholeness, forgiveness, and a courageously open heart, especially in your relationships with other people. This is really important because we really need to really need to experience a heart opening here. You know, Venus is in Pisces, which is all connected to the heart. If we go into fear, we're going to feel that separation. But if we go into our heart, we can really feel that connectedness with everyone around us, with the energy around us. And we see how it's all working in beautiful unison together. You know, that we're all connected and we're all making the wheels turn in some way, and they're all linked in with each other, right? So we're really being invited to love ourselves and heal deep fears of not being good enough. And this is connected to the Venus-Chiron connection, right? And also Mars-Chiron connection. So there's some deep insecurities that we have from the past, and we need to learn how to heal these insecurities. And that's really all about love. It's all about self-love, because love is the biggest healer there is in every which way, whether that's towards yourself, towards other people, towards animals, towards the planet. Doesn't matter. Love is a huge healer. So here's some coaching questions you can ask yourself with this, right? What might happen if I embraced myself exactly as I am and as I'm not? And could I at least be open to forgiving myself for having limitations and sensitivities? And I think that second question is really, really powerful, because we all have limitations. We all have sensitivities in one way or another. It's just, you know, are we going to suppress that? Are we going to deny that and ignore that? Or are we actually going to start embracing that and forgiving ourselves for having limitations? Because the conditioning, you know, for most of us, depending on what generation we were born into, has been very much about, you know, you have to do things right. You have to be good at what you're doing. You know, you can't be sensitive about certain things, or you can't have these limitations. You know, we're raised we're trained, in a sense, you know, we're trained to not want to embrace limitation or sensitivities, because it's a no-no in our society, right? Especially in the Western world. So could you at least be open to forgiving yourself for having limitations and sensitivities, right? That's a great question to just kind of be with. Now, slow and steady is the key here as well with this combination. And so it's really critical to keep checking our beliefs and maintaining our emotional and spiritual connections, right? And however that looks like for you, because that looks different for everybody, right? However you can connect to yourself on a spiritual, creative, or emotional level in a way that feels good to you, do it, right? And pushing is something that definitely won't get us what we want for the next 2 weeks. So as best as you can, you know, just allow yourself to keep that slow and steady pace, you know, to take your hands off from pushing for the next 2 weeks. And, you know, sometimes it's better to go one step at a time. And then that way we can come back later with a much stronger approach and a much more mature way of seeing what our expectations are with ourselves, with other people, with the world, right? So what might that look like for you right now? You know, what might it look like for you when you just slow down, take it one step at a time, and just kind of rethink and see if you can have a different approach and more mature expectations, right? Now, the other configuration with this new moon is that Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, is currently in Aries and is making several aspects, just like Venus. Firstly, it's squaring Pluto like it has been for a while, but it's also now squaring Mercury in Capricorn, because Mercury is now joining Pluto again. It also opposes Jupiter in Libra, just like it has been. And finally, it also trines Saturn in Sagittarius, which we've also mentioned before in previous videos. But, you know, this particular alignment, these aspects are really asking us to redefine personal and collective freedom. And especially since Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, with this new moon chart, Uranus really has the focus of this for the next 2 to 4 weeks. So we're really invited, you know, to release old patterns, especially around gender. And so we can really fulfill our unique role at this critical juncture on this planet, you know, because just like in the 1960s when Uranus and Pluto were conjunct, you know, right now they're squaring each other off, but when they were conjunct, we were laying the groundwork for future generations. And this is what we're doing now as well. And just as it was true then, we really need to let our vision direct our thoughts and actions and not our fear. So it's very important that we distinguish between vision and fear. Fearfully or impulsively wanting to create change, or having a vision for a better future and moving with that vision and keeping that vision in mind so that we can move towards change, right? And that is a very different approach. So we have to really distinguish between the two and really see where are we at currently in our own experience with that, right? So simply know that it's possible. Simply know it's possible to create that change if we keep the vision in mind that we have long term, and that each of us, we're contributing. Each of us have the ability to contribute to that vision if we choose to, right? It's a matter of choice. And I think I mentioned that already in my last video briefly. So that said, because Pluto is involved, somewhat paradoxically, bringing forth a global consciousness that's based on freedom and equality and mutual benefits, like we want with Uranus, with the Uranian energy, and also Jupiter and Libra wants that too, of course. We will need to address our shadows, and I know I talked about this in my last video a little bit as well. The shadows, our unconscious, everything that's suppressed, everything that we fear, that's denied, that's ignored, everything that we feel shameful about. We need to address those shadows in order for us to create that kind of global consciousness, right? Because without addressing those lower vibrations and those things that we've denied, we're not able to move up. We're not able to move forward. We're not able to really truly create what we envision and what we want to create. So in other words, the inner work does not only continue that we've been on for a while now, it really informs and enables that vision that we have for our future, right? So keep remembering that the inner work is important, that we need to continue doing that. And so I ask myself, and I invite you to do the same as well for the next 2 to 4 weeks, what are my true motivations? What is really inside of me? What do I really want for my future, and how am I motivated to get there? And if fear were driving me, what might those fears be, right? If fears were driving me, what might those fears be? And what might shift if I faced those fears and acknowledged them and brought them out into the open? And fear, it's something very interesting, is that once we know what we're afraid of, and once we can name that, it almost loses its power. Very often with shadow stuff, when we don't suppress it or deny it anymore, and we bring it up into the consciousness and we see it for what it is without judgment, and just from a neutral place, it usually loses its power over us, right? So just see what might shift if you faced those fears and acknowledged them and brought them out into the open, right? And again, very important, coming from neutral, not coming from right or wrong or good or bad, right? Just coming at it like you're meeting it as an equal, right? So another question you can ask yourself here too is, what if I allowed myself to surrender to my own higher power, or to my passionately pumping, wildly open heart? And that is definitely a Pluto question right there, right? The passionately pumping, wildly open heart. So can you surrender to that? Can you surrender to the place in you that really authentically, feels connected to your passion, to life, to the world, to yourself, all of that? And can you surrender to that? And the other part of these aspects is it's all about the truth, right? Because Saturn is involved. Saturn is making a trine to Uranus, and this really helps us to trust our inner truth. And so just remember then that when our bodies feel relaxed and open, we're very probably standing in our truth, right? And Saturn really helps us with this. It's supporting us to kind of take a more serious look at our belief systems. And once we can take a look at our belief systems, we can see what is true and what is not true for us personally, right? And this can really lead to our admitting and owning where our current path is sort of like not in alignment from where we walked based on past beliefs, right? So we need to kind of distinguish where have we been walking and where are we walking now, or what have we been believing and how is that different from what we're now believing, and how do we need to change what we're doing because of that, right? And so by definition, a better future pretty much always requires doing things differently, right? Or doing different things, right? So it's either we need to do different things or we need to do them differently, right? So be ready to correct your course or just set a new one, depending on where you're at and what's in alignment with you. And don't be afraid to do that, because the truth will always set you free. The truth is so much more powerful than anything else. When we lie to ourselves, when we deny ourselves the truth, when we suppress things, that always leads to suffering, and it always leads to inner turmoil and heaviness. But when we're able to be courageous and open-hearted and just say, I'm going to correct my course, I'm going to set a new course that is in alignment with my truth, that always brings much more clarity, much more happiness, much more groundedness in who you are. That's true empowerment right there. So ask yourself, is there another path that leads to my goals? And what if it were possible to take responsibility and be flexible at the same time? And this is a really, really great question. I love that question because, taking responsibility, very often we see that as, when you are a parent or when you're an adult, like being responsible means yes, I do this. And there's no movement there. It's just, yes, this is what it is. And so how can we be that? How can we be responsible? Meaning really, really looking at where we can step up and own things, but at the same time still allow ourselves to have built-in flexibility, not allow ourselves to get rigid, right? Because when there's rigidity that comes in with responsibility, that creates suffering again, because then without flexibility, there's injury usually, right? I always say with yoga, when if there's rigidity with yoga, there's injury that can occur. And I think this is the same true for life. When we have rigidity in any area of our lives, we tend to create injury or suffering. So another question you can ask yourself, what if I forgave myself for just a moment? And this is, just take a breath, actually, just listening to that question, because that is such a powerful question, and if you can just ask that like once a day or even just once a week, what if I forgave myself just for a moment, and just pause right there and see what comes up. Very powerful. That can really release a lot of energy and a lot of tension, right? And especially, what if I forgave myself just for a moment, even for my limitations that I still have, for all the fears that I still have, maybe even for my phobias and for all the stuff that I still carry around, whether this is from this lifetime or from another lifetime, all the stuff that feels kind of like tense and tight in us. What if we can forgive ourselves for that just for a moment? Very powerful question. So just, if you can just meditate on that or sit with that, powerful, powerful. So as you can see, we're really being asked to let go of our fearful past conditioning, and especially our scarcity mentality. And instead, really allow ourselves to be immersed in a vision that calls us to live into the highest versions of ourselves, right? But we can only do that if we first address the conditioning, if we first address the stuff that's been suppressed, right? So how could self-care and self-love support me in this? In moving from that conditioning into the highest version of myself? How can self-care and self-love support me in this? And could honest conversation with myself and others help me face and embrace my fears and let go of past hurts? And that is, I think, a very powerful question too. Honest conversation. It's so important to be honest, when we speak, whether that's in our own inner dialogue or whether that's with other people face to face, and really embrace our fears. And that can really be very powerful. So a quick note about self-care, self-support, and self-love. Normally, when we say selfish motivations, we generally mean those that come from fear. But I want to invite you to kind of reclaim that statement of selfish motivations from a term of love or coming from love. When you say that, what kind of selfish motivations could you have from a place of love? And just ask yourself, am I not deserving of love and support just as any external person would be? So, other people out there in the world, we don't have a problem very often to send love or support to people outside of ourselves. And it's so much harder for us very often to either receive it or to give it to ourselves, because very often we don't feel that we're deserving of that love and that support, because there's such a strong inner critic in us very often that keeps us from being open enough to let that in, right? So another question you can ask yourself, where and how could self-oriented motivations serve you, right? So when we really think of it, selfish motivations, you can also say self-oriented motivations, right? Where does that serve me in my life? To really look at what works for me. How can I connect with myself in a way that raises my vibration or that serves something bigger, right? And you know what? We're all agents of change. We already are. We always are. And so, the more we take care of ourselves, we can really be that light out there in the world. And right now, our individual capacity to affect change is far greater than we're realizing, especially with what's going on astrologically speaking. These energies, they really are providing this capacity for us to create change. And so especially for those of us who have Uranus, Aquarius, or 11th house planets strongly emphasized in our birth charts, for those of us, that is especially true, right? So, and you probably, if you have that in your chart, you probably know that you are that person. So, think about this. When you team up with other people who also care deeply about having a better future for this planet and for all its life forms that are living on this planet, how can you team up so that you can create a tremendous change in the world? Yes, do things individually, but also team up with like-minded people where the shift or the change that we can create can multiply, right? Because when people come together, the energy multiplies. Again, one thing to remember though, when we do that, when we do get together with other people, aim for wholeness, forgiveness, and above all, keep a courageously open heart. And that's very important. We do not want to come from fear, especially not when we come together in groups of people, right? Because that fear, if we come together with people who are also scared, that can also multiply. So we want to be very aware of that, very conscious of that, and really look into our own motivations. What are our own motivations here in terms of that fear? And, when we can have our heart wide open, we can shine our light much brighter, and our authentic selves are going to be more visible, and all of that serves the collective. All of that serves a better future, and it's in the making. Every day it's in the making, right? So just focus on that. Now, if you have 6 to 10 degrees of Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio in your birth chart, personal planets, an ascendant or career point, right? Anything like that, then you definitely feel this new moon more strongly. Even if you don't have personal planets in those degrees and signs, if you take a look at the house placement in your natal chart that's affected by the new moon, that's equally as important. So, because that will indicate which area of your life is up for development for the next 28 days and up for changes or improvements, right? So take a look at where 8 degrees of Aquarius lands in your birth chart, if you have a birth chart, and then just look to see what that house or that area of your life stands for, and how you can create a new vision for yourself in that area of your life, or how you can make improvements. And if you don't have a birth chart, and if you don't know how to look that up in your birth chart, then definitely feel free to watch the How to Read Your Birth Chart video that I mentioned earlier already. And just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write recording in the subject line. And it's also a really great video to watch before you join the monthly forecasting forum. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I want to briefly talk about that before we talk about intention settings for the new moon. It's really, I would say, it's the next best thing besides getting a one-on-one reading with me, because we will use our birth charts actively, and we will look to see how the upcoming energies in mid to late February are going to impact us personally by looking at where the energy patterns land in our birth charts, right? So like I already mentioned, we have 2 eclipses coming up back to back. The first one is in Leo, the second one is in Pisces. And if you want to know how this is going to impact you personally, then definitely join the next forum on Saturday, February 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. London time. Okay, and you can sign up for the webinar live, or you can register to receive an MP4 video recording within 24 hours of the live event. All that is possible. And, really, besides getting a one-on-one reading with me, this is really great support. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of that, because it's really only $24. So it's a huge value for what you're getting in this 90 minutes of this webinar, right? You can register on my website at astrologercoach.com by clicking on the link below the Saturn and Sagittarius video. And please also fill out my online form, as well as make your payment on that monthly forecasting forum page, because the online form tells me whether you will be joining live or if you want the recording. And you can also ask questions in advance. And the questions are great if you can't join live and you just want to watch it as a recording. You can ask questions and I will address your question during the webinar, and so you still get a ton of benefit as well, right? Even if you can't be there live. And please, when you ask questions, the best way to ask questions is to ask questions related to what we're covering during the webinar, right? Because then that's helpful for everybody. And anything that's related to something completely different or more personal, I will ask you to book a reading with me. Okay, but I will do my best to answer as many questions as I possibly can. All right, so now the new moon intentions. Let's talk about that. So we want to set some very powerful intentions for this moon cycle. Intentions are best done soon after the new moon becomes exact, and definitely not during the moon void, of course, phases, of course. So this month, the best and most potent time to set intentions would be any time between 7:07 p.m. on January 27th and 12:52 a.m., which is right after midnight, on January 29th. And then again from 11:10 a.m. until 7:07 p.m. on January 29th as well. And all of this is New York time, East Coast time. So if you live in a different time zone, feel free to plug in these time zones into a time zone converter online. You can search one on Google. If that's a little bit too complicated for you, then feel free to just join me on Facebook or on Twitter, because I'll be posting during those most potent times. I'll be saying, set your new moon intentions now. This is the best time to do it, several times. And then that way you don't have to look it up. You can just, as you see that on my Facebook fan page or on my Twitter page, okay, now it's time to set my intentions. Now, this new moon definitely reminds us that to be fully alive, we must stretch and grow and change. So while you write your intentions, just ask yourself, what would it take for me to boldly follow my dreams? And who could I connect with to do that, right? So again, it's about really collaborating and connecting with other people as well as doing our own inner journey. It's both, right? And if you want to have more information on setting new moon intentions, then feel free to either go to my Facebook fan page and check the notes sections from your computer. Unfortunately, that can't be accessed from an iPhone or Android. Or you can go to my website, go to weekly forecasts and click on that link where it says weekly forecasts on my website, and then look for astrology articles on the left side of the web page, and then click on astrology articles and you will find an article on setting new moon intentions. You know, my website is astrologercoach.com, of course. And again, also all the questions from this video are also available on my website via my weekly forecasts after January 22nd. And you can also sign up to receive these weekly forecasts via email if you email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecast in the subject line. And you will receive a weekly forecast every Sunday evening. If you don't want to receive any emails from me on a weekly basis, then feel free to sign up for my newsletter that goes out twice a month. And the newsletter basically has my special offers, videos, announcements about my courses, webinars, about any changes in my business. So anything like that is in the newsletter. So if you want to receive that twice a month, just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line. All right, so that's it for this new moon. If you have any questions, feel free to either email me at sonja@astrologercoach.com. If the question is a personal question that requires for me to pull up your birth chart, I will ask you to either book a reading at astrologercoach.com, or you can also connect with us via the monthly forecasting forum if you want to have anything addressed that's coming up within the next 30 to 40 days. All right. So feel free to do that. And also just know that my first availability for a reading won't be until the week of February 6th, because I will be at an astrology conference for a couple of weeks, just so you know. So book your reading now so you get a great time slot as soon as possible. All right. Have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.